I think it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I agree.
Right, well, should we get started then, because I think everyone who's here is in, and I'll keep an eye on anyone if they arrive later. So first of all, a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon's event. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Charlotte Pike. I'm chair of the Guild, and I'm really delighted to welcome you all to our online festive afternoon tea and stories. And this afternoon we have members Kate Young, Regula Ysewijn and Sam Bilton, who are going to talk to you about their lovely new books and all things festive. I'm just letting in, we've got Jonathan coming, just let him in as well.
Oh yes, let him in.
I will. And in terms of housekeeping, we're going to do a talk for about 40 minutes, and as per usual, we love it if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves throughout. Any questions can go on the chat, and I will field them to Kate, Regula and Sam as we go, and then we'll open up for questions a little bit later on towards the end of the session. So we'll aim for about an hour or so, if that's okay. Just to let you know, we are recording this to go on our YouTube channel, and if you would prefer not to be recorded, please do turn off your camera, but we will be sharing it afterwards. So I think that's everything I need to mention. Ladies, so Kate, Regula and Sam, welcome.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's so nice to see you all here. So where should we start then? Sam.
Oh, I was expecting you to come to me first, actually. Okay, so some of you will know me already because I'm involved in the awards for the Guild, and I'm also co-vice chair with Sam Goldsmith. But for those of you who don't, I'm a food historian, writer and cook based in Sussex. And so in terms of, I mean, obviously I write about historical food, but I also have a supper club, and we're not in the middle of a pandemic, where I cook historically themed meals for paying guests. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I do as my bread and butter, if you like. But I've just written my first book. It has been a long time coming. I've been trying for many, many years to get commissioned, and finally succeeded. And the subject was the history of gingerbread, which is, I know, incredibly niche, but I found it incredibly fascinating. So I'm looking forward to talking to you more about that today. Yeah, and that's about it in a nutshell for me.
Fantastic. Should we move on to Kate next?
Hi, I'm Kate. I have written a few cookbooks now. This one about Christmas is my third one, which is the Little Library Christmas. And essentially, I write about the sort of intersection between books and food, and I take scenes from literature and recreate meals from them. And so in previous books, that's been things like the crab and avocado salad that makes everyone sick in the bell jar. And that is stuff like apple pie from the Railway Children, or a whole section on apple things from Cider with Rosie. But in this particular book, it's been very much about Christmas food and Christmas literature.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate. And Regula.
Hello, everyone. I'm Regula. I'm from Belgium. I'm here in Antwerp in my kitchen, and I write mostly about the history of British food, though I have also been researching my own culinary history of the Low Countries more recently, and I have published six books or seven now. I lost count. All on the history of culinary traditions. This year I've published two. I wasn't supposed to, but so the first one was oats in the north, wheat from the oats in the north, wheat from the south, which is full of baking recipes from Britain, some classics, some obscure ones, some forgotten ones, and their history, and some essays dotted around about the British love for toast and things like that. I'm like an outsider looking into British culture. So I think maybe I see sometimes things that you take for granted, like that whole toast thing that you have. And the other book I published just recently, I wrote during this pandemic, is the Downton Abbey Christmas Cookbook. And that was supposed to come out next year, but they just spent some extra money to have it published this year, because they figured everyone can do with some Christmas cheer and a Christmas Downton book, especially in the States, because Downton's been shown in the States much later than in the UK. So now it's their peak moment over there. So I think they wanted to just spread the Christmas cheer, which is great. I mean, I'm really happy, because I feel in Belgium as well, there's no Dutch edition. Everyone's buying it because they have something like, you know, we want this Christmas book because we don't have much else to look forward to in Christmas, because we actually can't see our family at Christmas. So let's fill all those gaps with books.
Amazing, thank you. So Regula, what does a Downton Christmas look like?
Oh, well, it's of course very opulent, very upper class. In this book, I didn't focus on, I focused on upper class food. I didn't look at downstairs, because there was just much more to say about the upstairs story. And I didn't focus solely on the period of Downton Abbey. I wanted to give like an overview of Christmas recipes in Britain throughout history, to bring that story of what is Christmas food and how did it become Christmas food, because that's a very recent thing, that recipes are allocated with Christmas this, Christmas that. And I gave a brief history of Christmas, and some extra bits around the book on the authors of the books I chose the recipes from, which are they are mostly from Victorian period, when Mrs. Patmore was studying to be a chef, and then of course the start of the 20th century, and then some, you know, the 1390, the form of curry. I took a goose recipe from there because it's still very relevant, because it's made with quince. So it's still a very relevant recipe. So yeah, I think it's a book where you can just, you can dive into it and look at Christmas through the ages, and you also get the story of what a Downton Christmas looks like, and why it looks the way it does, and why it looks the way it does, because it is Downton Abbey in that region. And because of course they had they ate a lot of game, because that's what they had in around the castle. I think that's about it. Yeah.
Amazing. And Sam, as a food historian, what are you going to be eating this Christmas that you've discovered from your research, if anything?
Oh, that is a question, isn't it? Do I give you the honest answer, or do I give you the answer that I should probably be saying? I should probably be saying goose, and we have had goose for many years on the run, but I now have 2 teenage boys who just eat me out of house and home. And but as lovely as goose is, you don't get an awful lot of meat on a goose, especially not when you're feeding these 2 ravenous teens. So they actually asked for steak, I'm afraid.
Nice.
That is the honest answer. I'm putting my hands in.
It's very British. It's very British. I mean, having beef at Christmas is a very British thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't got my act together this year, but I do like. In the past, I've done things like spice beef, which I love. But yeah, they were very specific. They wanted steak. So that's what we're having, I'm afraid. Not very historic, but we are having, of course, we're having plum pudding for dessert.
For dessert, you should have it with the beef, as it's supposed to.
We should, yeah, but I think even they might, that might be a stretch for them. I think they're used to eating quite a lot of weird historical stuff, but I think they draw the line when I start giving them, if I try to give them plum pudding.
Try it. This first for everything. I mean, it's
I'm blaming you, and they don't eat it. I will go. I should do.
Well, you can serve half with the beef and half for pudding.
Yeah, yes, I could, couldn't I? Really, that's
Yeah. It's very good together. I think it's just the same as serving some kind of compote with meat. So
yeah. Do you ever cook slices of it underneath a joint of beef, or do you just boil it? Yeah.
Yeah. But what I prefer doing is having the pudding cooked and then baking it after it's been cooked, slicing it, then putting it on the dripping, underneath the dripping of a joint of meat, and then having the dripping fry it.
Yeah.
Which is very good because of course it's already been cooked, but then you get the crispy bits from it being fried, which is fantastic.
It does sound good. I've not tried that. I have to. We usually just have regular plum pudding. Kate, where do you have? There must be loads of stories that, apart from the obvious Dickens one, that feature Christmas puddings or plum puddings.
Oh yeah, tons and tons. We have a plum pudding every year because it's what my great grandma used to make. So I grew up in Australia, where it is currently I talked to my parents yesterday. It was 36 degrees yesterday. So it's a quite different time of year to have Christmas, and you don't always want a steamed pudding at the end of a meal because it is roasting hot, but we still have it every year anyway because it is what my great grandma used to make. But plum pudding's in everything. Paddington takes a slice of Christmas pudding up to bed with him after Christmas dinner, and everyone eats them. Dickens, all Mitfords, all of it. There's plum pudding in everything.
Yeah.
But it is super emblematic to British food culture. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It appears also in political pamphlets, not just in literature, which is also very fun to find out that the food culture kind of goes into politics as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it certainly is. From that perspective, I think it's iconic, really, in this country, isn't it? Pudding.
Absolutely.
Christmas pudding Christmas without Christmas pudding, and yet, so the press say the sales of puddings are going down. But maybe this year they'll either go up or people will make their own. Hopefully,
people might make their own. But I totally get why you would buy one. Like, I understand if you're not somebody who makes a lot of desserts, then it's quite a full-on time commitment thing to start with. The batter's not that difficult, but sort of the steaming and then having it, and I get why you'd want to buy one.
Yeah.
I've just found this small piece of text of that political pamphlet, if you want me to read it, because it's really, really funny. So I've entitled it, "Plots and Politics May Hurt Us, but Pudding Cannot. The head of a man is like a pudding, and whence have all rhymes, poems, plots, and inventions sprang? But from that same pudding, what is poetry but a pudding of words?" So that's short. I can go on if you want me to. The law is but a cookery of quibbles and contentions. Some swallow everything whole and unmixed, so that it may rather be called a heap than a pudding. Others are so squeamish. The greatest mastership in cookery is required to make the pudding palatable. The suet, which others gape and swallow by gobs, must for these puny stomachs be minced to atoms. The plums must be picked with the utmost care, and every ingredient proportionate to the greatest nicety, or it will never go down. And that's 1726.
Amazing.
I love it.
So, as you guys are both from, as you just said, Kate, outsiders, so to speak, are there any traditions in your own countries that you think we should perhaps try in this country? Christmas festive traditions?
None of ours have lasted. We eat rabbit with prunes, but then so many other people eat chicken. There's no tradition in turkey or goose or duck, or it's the coming together. But there's no tradition in having some kind of pudding or some kind of sweet. Again, that's why probably I ran to Britain for my food inspiration, because we actually don't have anything.
That can't be. You are overlooking something. You have the fish and the pork
Yes, of course. But we don't have anything that we still do today. So everything that was one day there, it's not being practiced anymore, and hasn't been for the last 50 years.
But what about bringing it back?
Oh yeah, that's
You can do
big
that.
secret,
That's
big secret. I'm trying to do it, but
your
it's
next book. Your next book. I'm waiting for it. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
that's the plan. Yeah.
Right.
We
How about in Australia? Is there
we eat
anything
a lot
that-
of salad and a lot of seafood, and most of it's cold. And I'm obviously a big fan of that at all times of year. But I wouldn't say that we need to sort of replicate an Australian Christmas here. That said, what we always have for dessert alongside a plum pudding is a pavlova, which I think is a really good alternative if you aren't a plum pudding fan. Because if you're not a plum pudding fan, you're probably also maybe not a Christmas cake fan, and maybe not a mince pie fan. My brother doesn't eat anything with raisins in it. I think he had a really bad incident as a child when he thought he was eating a chocolate chip biscuit and was actually having a raisin biscuit. And so he's always just sworn off raisins in desserts. And so it means that at Christmas, this sort of pantheon of Christmas desserts available to him is restricted. So I always make him a pavlova.
That's a good solution.
Yeah.
My parents, well, my family, everyone comes to me for Christmas, but we have a small family, so it's just my parents and my mother-in-law, and I always make a Christmas pudding, and none of them like it. So I have the Christmas pudding all to myself, and I serve it with vanilla ice cream, because they just have the vanilla ice cream, and I have the plum pudding, and I have it with Stilton.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice. So can you get all the ingredients? I'm thinking of suet in particular, in Australia and Belgium. Is that easy to get hold of or not?
So we don't do our Christmas pudding with suet. My great grandmother never did, because I think it just is that bit heavier. And I think that our sort of version of it is slightly, and I mean, it's still a Christmas pudding and it's still a steamed pudding, and you still have to boil it on the stove. But she makes them in August, and then while it's cold, and then hangs them up and dries them out, and then stores them, and then we sort of re-steam on Christmas Day. But it means that, yeah, she just hasn't ever played around with suet in hers. You can definitely get it. Suet's definitely gettable in Australia, though it's less of a thing than it is here.
So you don't feed the pudding then?
No, we feed our Christmas cake, but not the pudding.
Not the pudding. I can't get, well, I can get suet if you look for it, but I always get these erratic messages from people saying, I can't find suet in Belgium. And I'm like, Google it. I mean, there's always a British shop here and there, so you can get it if you want to. You can get suet in Belgium. But I basically just bring it with me when I visit the UK. So I always have a couple of boxes of suet in my suitcase on my way home. And when we drive over, we go home with an entire car full of food. So if you need it, you can get it, and if you can't get it, you can ask your butcher and start rendering your own, which takes ages, but it's possible.
I only ask because I remember talking to some Canadian people a few years ago, and we were on a cookery course, and they were mildly horrified at what suet was, because they were like, we don't get suet so they claimed. Although
so
maybe they hadn't looked very hard, but they were quite horrified when they actually realized what suet was.
I just don't understand these kind of cuisines. I mean, it's why is it different from lard? I mean, it's from a different part of the animal, but it's still, it's animal fat. It's not that different from butter, of course. It's less carcass linked, but it's. I mean, people are so childish when it comes to fat.
So what would your alternative puddings be then? Kate said pavlova, regular. If you weren't having your plum pudding with Stilton, what would you have?
Bakewell pudding, definitely. I love Bakewell pudding, like from an old recipe, so not the recent things with animal essence, almond essence. Still thinking about the suet. But I think it's one of the most glorious puddings in the British repertoire, and making it with the actual apricot kernels, so kind of safe bitter almonds, just makes it into this beautiful flavor sensation. And everyone I've served it to, they were always amazed and like, oh, so this is how almonds, like bitter almonds, are supposed to taste, because everyone knows the flavor of, you know, out of the bottle, but it's not the same as the actual real thing, because there's much more bitterness I think it's always a crowd pleaser, because I think if you want to have people taste history, something like the Bakewell pudding is a very good one to bake, so people can taste something which really is tasting the past.
I think for me,
I make a pecan pie.
Oh, nice.
Delicious.
And that always, for those who don't like the plum pudding, of which I very much enjoy, because I have to do, because 3 of us in our family are gluten and dairy intolerant. So our Christmas pudding, which was made rather late this year, given that I haven't had a job, it's very, I'm almost behind. But for those who don't do Christmas pudding, the pecan pie is an absolute, goes down a treat, some really good pastry, because you can make good gluten-free pastry now and dairy-free, and it really does hit the mark with that lovely crunch of the pastry and the pecan nuts.
I've made Nestle Road pudding. You're going to correct me on this, is that how have I pronounced it correctly? I'm never quite sure with some of these historical dishes, which is an ice pudding made with chestnuts, and that's nice. That's also can be gluten-free as well. So
What's that one called again, Sam?
Nestle Road pudding. There is a recipe for it in Regula's book.
Yes.
I should be plugging my own book by now, plugging Regula's, but there's definitely a recipe.
We'll plug each other's books. No, yeah, it's true. The Nestle Road pudding is.
But it's well, perhaps you should describe it, because you've got the recipe, Regula.
Yes, of course. So it's made with chestnuts, and it's and booze, of course. And it just has this beautiful flavor. You think, oh, chestnuts in ice cream. It does have a strange texture, but it's still very pleasant. And it's also something that you don't generally come across. Like, you know, the flavor of chestnuts is very subtle, but it's very Christmassy. And funnily enough, in one of my other books, I have a muck plum pudding ice cream, which is basically a Nestle Road ice cream, but with currants and raisins and candied fruits put in. And it was made to mimic the flavor of a plum pudding or a Christmas pudding. And it, funnily enough, it does taste a little bit like Christmas pudding, but strange because it's cold and it's ice cream. But it's a wonderful recipe, and it's wonderful if you serve it to especially British people who know Christmas pudding. They go like, what? This is so cool. So, I mean, food history can be super cool.
Indeed. Oh, well, that's a must for this year. In Scotland, we've never, you know, I'm not in Scotland now, but I was brought up there. You know, as I say, it was the pecan pie or tiramisu, but that one sounds, yeah, that's definitely worth a try. And that's in the book, you say?
So the Nestle Road pudding is in the Downton Abbey book, and the mock plum pudding ice cream is in Pride and Pudding. That was my first book.
Lovely. Okay, Downton Abbey book.
Can I add something? It's very similar that you'd probably like if you like pecan pie. It's Cumberland Rum Nicky.
Oh, tell me.
That one you make with dates, and some people put in apricot, and it's marinated with rum, and then you cook it as a pie with a lattice crust. I haven't got all the ingredients. You can Google it, but it's a very old one. And the interesting part is the historical part, because who knew? I mean, why are you getting a date and rum pie in Cumberland? But it turns out that was one of the terminals of the Caribbean rum trade. So they would go and they had all this rum, and somehow the dates turned up. And this is an absolutely fabulous thing. Go on, Google it and try it. I think it's better than pecan pie, but if not, it's just as good. Honestly, very, very Christmassy.
It's actually in my book, Oats in the North.
Fantastic. Oh, you're wonderful. You are wonderful.
Yeah. But I have like doubled mixed feelings about the dish, although it's delicious, of course, but it is very much connected to slavery, because everything used in that recipe comes from the slave trade. But it's delicious. It is.
It
definitely.
is. Listen, in your recipe, do you use apricots?
No,
No, I thought not.
and no dates either.
Gosh, what do you have in it? Rum.
Rum
right,
and,
right.
and
Rum and
minced meat as well.
Oh,
So you of course, because it's a very old recipe, you got a lot of different ways to
do it, yes.
Nikki. I make mine with minced meat because so many people do, and also because the recipes in my book for minced meat are quite large, and then people have more ways to use up minced meats. Otherwise, it just, you find these jars in the back of your cupboard with minced meat dated 6 years ago. You don't want that. You want to use it up.
Yes. Thank you.
What do you recommend for ginger lovers?
In terms of desserts, or just ginger generally?
Both.
Well, I mean, I've got a recipe in my book for it's not terribly historic, but for a cheesecake, white chocolate cheesecake with a cranberry compote, which is very good, and that uses ginger biscuits as a base. I usually use a ginger snap, which are very crisp biscuits but very thin. So actually, probably I've never tried hanging them on the tree. I've had major failure with Christmas tree decorations over the years with trying various mixture. I think it's just real trees, the moisture in them seems to make the biscuits go a bit soggy, but yeah, they're really crisp, lovely biscuits, and they go well with cheese. And they the recipe in my book is from 1915, although I mean there's obviously gingerbread recipes themselves go back centuries and centuries. So yeah, that's always a nice one. It's quite light actually. It's not a baked cheesecake, but it's quite a light cheesecake, so it's quite nice as a Christmas alternative to pudding. I also have a gingerbread pudding in the book, which I have to admit I did take inspiration from Regula's book in terms, because I was cooking them as individuals in the oven rather than steaming them on the top. But that's quick and easy to do, so it's not hours and hours that Kate was talking about with Christmas pudding, which, as you say, it's lovely, but it's a time commitment. Oh.
You didn't show the cover of your book.
Well, no, I didn't know we were showing the books. I have got it was buried under my sausage rolls. Yeah, so that's always, those two are quite nice as alternatives. If you don't like dried fruit, which I do find a lot of people have an issue with dried fruit. I hear that constantly about the mince pies and Christmas cake and Christmas pudding, of course, because of the dried fruit. But you were saying before we went live that your alternative is trifle. Now, that I think is a love-hate relationship. Kate, what's your take on trifle?
Love trifle. My friend, the year that I did sort of an orphans Christmas, which was a bunch of my friends who were in the UK who were all Australian and didn't have places to go at Christmas. So I've got kind of an adopted family that I spend Christmas with. But it must have been my maybe third year here, maybe fourth. And I had enough friends in London who all didn't have anywhere to go. And I was like, well, I'll cook dinner. This sounds great. And my mate brought his mum's trifle for dessert, and in a bucket, because he didn't have a bowl big enough, but he just put it inside of a plastic bucket. And it was so amazing. And we ate it for days afterwards. It's just fantastic. I'm a big fan of trifle though, generally.
Me too, and especially I just absolutely adore the first recipe for trifle as we know it today from Hannah Glass, and it's just biscuits. It's just the sponge finger biscuits and ratafia biscuits, which are like amaretti biscuits, booze, and then there's a syllabub on top, and that's it. And it's so fantastically simple. No layers with fruit and jelly, and although I mean I do like retro trifle as well. It's nice, but I like that simplicity of Hannah Glass's trifle, the first trifle as we know it. Well, not know it today because we put loads of layers in, but it's just so it looks more like a tiramisu than a trifle. But it's glorious.
I would like that. But I'm afraid I'm a trifle hater. This is what I was saying to Charlotte.
Is it the jelly? Or is it-
It's I
How
think
can that
when I was growing up, my mum, who is an excellent cook, but for some reason just insisted on making the bird's trifle, the mixture, you know, where you get all the different packets.
Oh God, that
which-
existed. That existed.
yeah, that,
Sorry, I'm well
Like
into that. Neither of you have got me on side. I'm well into that.
really.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, as a kid, I loved it, but yeah, it was. But she did used to add copious amounts of sherry to the very dry sponge. Well, I don't even know if you call them sponge, the dried biscuity things that you put in the base. But yeah, I'm afraid that's somewhat ruined trifle for me. But I keep looking at the Hannah Glass recipe, going, you know, just get over it. This isn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
get over
lovely.
it. It's so good. I mean, do you like tiramisu?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Oh, that's so weird. Why do you like tiramisu? It's basically the same thing. It's just, you know, different booze and mascarpone instead of the glorious syllabub. Or
I don't know. It was maybe it was the jelly. I don't know. There was just something about it. It
Try
was-
Hannah glasses.
yeah, that's what I need to do. Definitely.
You'll love it.
Judy's just put in the chat about the shortage of ginger. Yes, I did see that, and it is nothing to do with me. I wish I
Where
could
do
say
you
it was. I wish I could say it was the Bilton effect, and everyone was bulk buying ginger, and that's why we've got a shortage. But no, you're right. It's because of that. There's been a disaster with the harvest. Although I did see ground ginger in the supermarket this week, so I don't know whether it's more fresh ginger that's been an issue.
It's so strange.
I think they said it was going to be both, and that there's going to be a real shortage, and you won't be able to get it at all. But
Yeah, I've still got, and it wasn't because I was panic buying, but I still have copious amounts. I did a lot of recipe testing, obviously, for the book, and most of the recipes, if not all of the recipes, had ginger in them. So yeah, I bought lots of ginger when I could. So I had a supply during the first lockdown. So I'm okay for ginger. So yeah.
I was
I'll be
lucky
all right, but
because
yeah.
I made some gingerbread men, and I was going to send them to my little grandson in New York. And I packed them up. I baked the things, about 8 or 10 of them. And then I packed them up and sent them to New York. And I sent a little story with it, telling him, he's only 5, telling him that they might not arrive whole. And I said, don't worry about it. There aren't any foxes to eat them on the plains, but they may not get there whole. And most of them did. And then I saw him on FaceTime eating them for his breakfast. And it was lovely to see that they'd got there.
Oh, brilliant. I didn't know whether you could send things like that overseas.
You can, but I think it's fine because they're dry. But to be
Right.
safe, when I had to fill in the customs form, I just said small gift for small grandchild and hoped that that would get away with it. And it did. So it was good.
So it's really strange to hear you say that there's a shortage in ginger, because today I was in the shop and I was amazed by the pile of fresh ginger.
Really? Oh.
So, but there is a traffic jam of lorries that reaches Belgium all the way through France, with lorries heading for the UK with all kinds of stock. So maybe it's that. It's all for Brexit preparations.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Don't want to talk about
No,
Brexit.
let's not.
But yeah, so in terms of, there are a lot of Christmas recipes that involve ginger or gingerbread, obviously. One thing we don't have a culture of in this country is using gingerbread in savoury recipes, which I know they do in Germany particularly. So they have a dish that they serve, I think, on Christmas Eve, a carp dish with a gingerbread, well, I say it's a gingerbread sauce, that makes it sound a bit odd, but they use gingerbread crumbs to thicken, much in the same way as we would have used breadcrumbs in Old English recipes. So I found that quite interesting when I was researching the book. And I was adamant I was going to include quite a few savoury recipes, and I did make some sausage rolls from my book. These are chestnut sausage rolls. They're vegetarian, but they have gingerbread crumbs in them as well. Again, that one's not particularly a historic recipe, but yeah, it's I don't know, in Belgium, do you have that culture of using gingerbread? Of course you do.
It's in your book.
I was thinking Christmas recipes, but
no Christmas recipes. But we in our traditional Flemish beef stew, we put it's not called gingerbread because there's no ginger in it, but it's like gingerbread. It's honey cake. So we put that in, and we also
like dumplings or to thicken.
No, to thicken, to thicken. Yes. We put like a slice of the honey cake in there, and also a slice of bread spread with mustard.
Nice.
So to get all these complex flavors, and then we also put a slice of it in. God, my brain is like, my brain is exploding. Where do we put another slice in? Oh yeah, there's this called sour meat, and it's not sour at all. It's also a little bit like a stew, but there's much more of the gingerbread in the sauce, and that's from our northern region going up to Holland, and we share the recipe with Holland. So and basically we always have that type of gingerbread in the house. It's a block gingerbread, so it's like almost like bread, and we eat it like bread. I grew up on it. I was given a slice of it spread with butter for my breakfast as a child. Until I could make clear to my mother that I didn't have a sweet tooth and I didn't want gingerbread with butter for my breakfast, and I wanted something savory. But and it's always around here. Oh, and then I have this absolute obsession with my culture's gingerbread molds.
I know, I'm very jealous. I have one that hangs in my kitchen, and I know I should be brave and use it to make beautiful cookies, but I look at it and I think, what will I do if all the dough gets stuck? But I have one that's very precious that hangs in my kitchen. But
I have one that comes up to my middle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I don't have an oven where I can bake.
I was about to say, do you have an oven big enough for that? No.
Mine are the smaller figures. They're not there.
It's hard to get them out when the molds are so big. It's hard to get them out in one piece. It's much more easier, of course, with a small wooden mold. But I've got an agate type oven, which is much deeper than a general oven, so I can fit some in. And my good friends have a wood-fired oven, and of course I can fit much bigger gingerbreads in there as well.
Wow, lucky. So, Kate, are there? Do you have any gingerbready stories? I'm curious that I should.
Well, they're ginger biscuits rather than gingerbread, but I've since moving to the UK have sort of spent most of my Christmases with a family who are half English, half Swedish, and so we have a sort of traditional Swedish Christmas Eve dinner as well as the English Christmas Day dinner, which makes for quite an intense couple of days in a row, because you have a Swedish smorgasbord on Christmas Eve, which is cold fish, then cold meat, then hot fish, then hot meat, then a gingerbread house. And so it's quite intense. We haven't done the gingerbread house in a while because we used to just buy it from IKEA and it's not that nice. So we never wanted to eat it after we smashed it up. But the one year I actually made the gingerbread house, we did eat it and really enjoy it. But none of us are really sweet tooth, so we're much more focused on the sort of the savoury part of the Swedish smorgasbord. But what I do love is Swedish pepparkakor, like little ginger spiced biscuits, and having them with cheese or just with coffee and stuff. But I make loads of them every year. They're the little biscuits that you get in the big tins at IKEA.
Yeah. And what about in actual literature? I did come across obviously a few references in various books when I was researching mine, but not necessarily directly related to Christmas. Although there is Jude the Obscure, where he's selling. They're not gingerbread houses; they're actually. It's a cathedral. He makes
it's a huge one, isn't it? Yeah.
Which seems like I actually did see someone did Notre Dame. I saw a picture of Notre Dame in gingerbread the other day on Twitter.
So extraordinary.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. But yes, are there any Christmassy stories relating to gingerbread in literature that you know of?
There's not super, so none of them that I have specifically attached onto, because the sort of even the Swedish biscuits that I do, the inspiration for those is very much Pippi Longstocking, and that scene is not a Christmas scene. It's much more of a just sort of general scene where she makes 500 biscuits on the floor of her kitchen and sort of cuts them out and puts them into the oven in big sort of conveyor belts, which is lovely, but it's not a particularly Christmassy scene. And again, there's lovely like ginger biscuits in War and Peace, but it's not necessarily, it's quite a wintry scene, but it's not specifically a Christmas scene. And obviously the sort of major gingerbread literary thing that we've got is Hansel and Gretel. Like that is the big image that people have in their heads when you talk about gingerbread houses and things like that. And they did a lot for popularity, but it's not, even that isn't a Christmas story.
No, and actually in the original story, the house wasn't actually made of gingerbread.
No, it's not, right?
Which is what's made. If you read and you see, I've got not as old, not an original, but I've got a book that was illustrated by Arthur Rackham from I think about 1920. That was my grandmother's, or in my grandmother's family, and he has quite it's not a very appetizing looking house. I mean, it's red walls, cake roof, and sugar windows, but when you see the house, it just looks like a house. It doesn't look like anything in any shape or form that you should be eating.
Yeah, we've got the context of it now that we put that onto it, but yeah.
Does anybody know the history of the White House gingerbread house? I mean, that's very elaborate, and it could be full of symbolism. Do you know the one I'm talking about? In the American White House, they have a gingerbread house every year, and small details reflect the current inhabitants. And it's gone on for a while, but I don't know how long. And I wondered if anybody knew.
I wonder if Trump did it. I mean,
oh yeah, they did. They did it this year. Yeah. What happens is, for the first time, the Rose Garden outside the White House is featured in marzipan, because apparently the First Lady redid the garden in her time there. So they like to flag it. Yeah, everyone tries to personalize it as a look what I did for our White House, but
Wow.
I don't know where it started. Anybody wants to find out, that'd be great. Now there's one for you. I mean, it's not literature, unless you count political literature as fantasy. You could go down that route.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, yeah, you certainly could, couldn't you? I didn't come across any, I didn't look into American gingerbread history too closely, because I was trying to focus mostly on the British side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be fascinating to research that.
Look, Google it, Trump's gingerbread White House, when this stops. So it's fascinating.
I'm guessing the gingerbread house must pretty much match Trump's color.
Yes, perhaps it does.
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, actually, no, if it did, it would be orange, wouldn't it?
It would be orange, true.
That's right. Yeah, I know.
It depends what you put in your gingerbread, though. You can, I mean, see, depending whether you use
Orange, yes.
Or honey, or even golden syrup, it can affect obviously the shade of the final product. So
I guess it's a better tan than he has, really.
Yeah, definitely. Probably more natural looking anyway.
Exactly.
Gosh, our hour is whizzing past.
really? Oh yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I was like, are we going to talk for an hour?
Does anyone have any other questions they'd like to ask? Feel free to take yourselves off mute if you would like to. Just have a little chat. I'm plotting my Christmas menus now. I've got loads of ideas of things to try. Got your cheesecake on my list, Sam.
I have it's very good actually. It's quite light, as I said. But anyway, I have a question, really for everyone. So I'm sort of talking from a history background. We used to have something called service à la française, where you had lots of different dishes in a course to choose from. You could pick and choose what you had, and that eventually sort of morphed into service à la Russe, which is, I'm guessing, period Downton Abbey set in, they would have been eating more à la Russe rather than à la Française. So what would you rather have? I know that Christmas is a time where we overeat and overindulge, but would you rather have service à la Russe, where you have an individual courses, even if it was like a tasting menu, or just lots of different things to choose from, and sweet and savoury at the same time, not necessarily having the sweet stuff right at the end? What would you prefer? And that's open to everyone.
I want it all at once.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I want it all at once to sort of like, that's what I really like about the Swedish smorgasbord, is that as you add, nothing gets taken away. So you might start with the cold fish and then add the cold meat and then add the hot fish and add the hot meat. And by the end of the night, you've just got this insane table of sort of 30 different things. And that's what I want.
Wonderful.
Regula, how
like
about you?
separate
You've
things.
obviously studied this, so.
Yeah, so well, in my family it was always à la Russe, à la Française, because it was always a buffet, so everyone could eat what they wanted. And yeah, I don't like that anymore. So because I had it all my life, so I go to the à la Russe style of serving the dishes, but still having some dishes on the table as well, especially the ones that are ornamental, like in Downton Abbey, you know, the Christmas pie. So you have that on the table, so you can show off to your guests, and you have a table decoration at the same time. So when I was doing all the recipe testing for Oats in the North, I was doing the pies all at Christmas, because I was like, I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, spend all that money on all that game and be the only one, me and my husband, having to eat the pies. So I made it for the family. So when they arrived, I put the pies on the table, and of course that was glorious. So it does, you know, historical British food and, well, European food, because the European cuisine in history has been quite similar. Is you know, the pies appear everywhere. It also appear in Dutch paintings. It sets the mood. It's impressive, and it's a different type of impressive as having a plate all like fiddly things on the plate, which I don't really like. I then prefer the big pies and the puddings, and especially molded puddings. Making a Christmas cake or a Christmas pudding in a decorative mold instead of just, you know, the ball or the Mason and Cash pudding shape, it makes also for some, you know, dinner theater, because that's all, you know, the British food history is all about theater on the table, creating a spread and creating dishes that would impress your guests.
Yeah, I think I would like, I'm a bit like Kate. I like to have lots of, I have FOMO. I always fear I'm going to miss out on something. I'd like to have lots of little things. I mean, we don't eat like that, obviously. That's what I would like. If someone else was doing the cooking, I'd love to have the pies. I'd love to have the puddings and just everything. So I can pick and choose and have little bits. Yeah, I would absolutely adore that. But yeah, as I'm doing the cooking, we very much have set courses and one dish at a time. So
I
how
think
about everybody else? What does everyone else think about the idea of having multiple things to choose from?
I like courses.
I like courses.
Yeah, I like à la Russe. It sounds excellent.
I was just trying to see if I could show from my phone. I don't know whether any of you went to the Fitzwilliam exhibition in January that Ivan Day curated, and there were some fantastic molds there and copies of traditional old pies, and I've got them on photograph. Sorry, that's my phone going. Oh, that's trying to get people not to phone me. I've told them not to. And there's just these fantastic molds that he has, and I don't know, can you, oh, it's getting too
You know, can see, yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. Wonderful.
And then these are the pies. Beautiful.
Wow.
He made with, sorry, I say it's not doing very well, but what they did was they made pies, and then they kept the feathers of some of the game and decorated the pies with them, garnished the pies with them. It was the most stunning exhibition.
I was very sad to miss it, but on the note on with the feathers, what they did in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance was they would at first in the Middle Ages they would cook the meat of a swan or a heron or a peacock, and then they would sew it back into its feathers so it would be on the table looking like it was alive. And sometimes they would even have these threads connected to the animals, and they made them move, so they looked like they were still alive on the dinner table. That was all about the theater on the dinner table. But of course that was a health hazard. So after a while, and after of course cooking techniques progressed, they put the meat into pies and made the pies look like the animals. So they started putting taxidermy heads of the peacocks or the swans or the turkey or whatever was there on the pie, and having the feathers come out in the back. That was not just for spectacle, but it was also a very early way of saying, this is a swan pie. They didn't have those little, you know, like we put on the cheese, this is Stilton. So it was basically also for the etiquette. It was very rude and very boorish to ask, what's inside that pie? You were supposed to know. And you could see because there was a head on it. And in the 17th century, it became even popular to create pies with a certain lattice top. And if you were a very proper person, you would know from the look of the lattice what type of pie or tart it was.
Amazing.
And do you remember we had a guild workshop up at the Guild Hall Library some time ago, and they talked about having Tudor times where they actually put live frogs inside shaped pies, and it was to get the to break the ice in conversation. So they'd open the lid and all these frogs would leap out.
Yeah, Robert May's bride pie has lots of different compartments, and some of the stuff is obviously edible, but in the centre he suggests either live frogs, birds, or snakes.
Yeah,
and
lovely.
They're only there to pass the time, as you say, to create a talking point. But can you imagine someone taking the lid off? It'd be like seeing that for that's Indiana Jones film where snakes sort of crawling over the table. It'd be horrific.
I don't know if you can see, but this is Georgian pudding, and it's called Pyramidus creams, and it's a jelly. And if the footman walked into the dining room carrying this jelly, it would have gone like that. So it was slightly erotic, and they loved it. They loved it in that period because it was bringing theatre, but it was also a little bit naughty.
Amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I don't know if anyone has any more questions at all.
Thank you.
Do feel free to fire away if you have any questions. And Kate, Regula and Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this afternoon. It was so fantastic hearing all of your stories and hearing about your books. They are 3 absolutely wonderful books. And before we finish, I should just say as well that we have our Guild Christmas party tomorrow night. I think it's our first ever Zoom Christmas party at 6 o'clock. So if you'd like to join us for drinks at 6 o'clock, then we'd absolutely love to see you there. So I think that's everything from an official point of view, but I don't know if anyone else has a question at all before we end this evening.
Oh, by the way, I just see people talking about the exhibition that was in was it Cambridge? So they have a beautiful catalogue with pictures. So you should search that out because it's a fantastic catalogue, but it's very limited in how many copies. So if you want to see the exhibition a little bit, I have it. I ordered it, and I think it's quite fabulous.
Barbara, is Long Melford Hall, is that where they used to do the dressing? They used to dress up I don't know whether it was. I went somewhere as a child. Grew up in Essex. Well, the first 11 years of my life, and we went somewhere, and you went through a tent, and when you came out the other side, that everyone was dressed up in Elizabethan costumes. It was absolutely amazing. It's probably one of the reasons I got into not necessarily food history, but history generally.
Yeah, that was Kentwell Hall. It's at the top of the village, and Milford's just a little bit
right.
south of it. Milford's a National Trust property, but Kentwell is owned by privately, and that was what they used to do and they still do it, but not always with Tudor times. They now do World War I or II events there as well, but the same thing.
Oh, I'm not sure I would have been quite so enamored. I just remember it was magical. We talk about magical time of the year, and it's not Christmassy, but it was just this the whole, being told that you were going to go back in time, and it literally did feel like that. You went through this tent and you came out, and everyone was. I'm sure they probably weren't perhaps they weren't very accurate costumes, but I was about 7 or 8, I think, at the time, so it was stuck in my memory all these years.
How wonderful! We'll come back and see it.
Oh no, I will definitely. Once we're out of lockdown, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
It was an amazing place, and what was lovely about going to see the house was because it was a private house, you would see people's toothbrushes and dressing gowns hanging up on doors, but it still had that Downton Abbey sort of feeling to it.
I don't remember going in the house. I don't remember. I just remember maybe they weren't happy about having lots of 7 and 8-year-olds rampaging through.
No, you would have been outside, but inside if you ever went on tour. So do that when you come next.
Yes, I will definitely when I come visit my parents.
Oh, good. Well, come and see me. I'm just about 5 miles away, or not even.
Oh, it'd be lovely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So.
Fantastic. Lovely. Well, thank you all so much for joining this afternoon. Kate, Regula, Sam, thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to us. And all of your books are available. They are in stock everywhere, aren't they? I think Catherine said, Sam, yours is best to get from Amazon or Blackwell's, if anyone.
Yes.
Watching
That's
at any
just
point.
because I've got too many orders and I'm tiny. So I'm also scared of running out of Sam's book, and I'm still trying to send ones out to reviewers, and our big warehouse is very, very busy. So I want to make sure you get it. So actually it is better, and Sam gets exactly the same royalty. It's not, don't worry about the discount thing. She's on publishing.
No, that's the worst thing really, that for us authors, it's actually better if people buy from things like Amazon, because Amazon figures are very important to us. But on the other hand, I love bookshops. So it's
a lot of books for the poor shops to stock, is the truth.
Yeah.
Kate, are you busy?
Yeah, I work in a bookshop, so December has been intense.
Big Christmas trade.
Yes, retail is weird this month. I've worked in food service since I was 14, but I've never worked in retail until this year. And Christmas retail is a ride. So yeah, it's been busy.
Are you open, Kate?
Yeah.
Is your shop open? Are you are allowed to open shops again in the UK?
Yes, so last week. So even during lockdown though, so I've been working in the shop every week since March.
Which shop is it?
It's Stroud Bookshop in the Cotswolds.
Right.
And I've every week since March, so back in sort of March when we first went into lockdown, my boss messaged and said, you're the only one not on furlough, can you go in for a couple of hours and just sort out some stuff in the shop? And I put on Twitter that I was there and sold like $2,000 worth of books in an afternoon, and he went, could you do that every Monday? And so I did that all through the first lockdown, and then we stayed open for click and collect last month during the second lockdown. So we haven't really had any time when we weren't there.
So it's an interesting thing that they decided here in Belgium, the government, they decided that bookshops are essential. So during lockdown, bookshops were allowed to stay open, which was incredible. Thing is a whole new type of mindset that they did in this second lockdown. So bookshops were allowed to stay open, and shops selling yarn and knitting needles and clay, so all the things that you can buy, to be creative, which I think is it's quite good. Yeah,
definitely.
Feel good.
Does anybody else have the problem when that? Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just me, but I get asked all the time, every year, what do you want for Christmas? And invariably, I have a long list of books that I would like, and then everyone goes, you've got way too many books, especially if they're any related to food or history. And I'm like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
So do Regular and Kate, do you get that? Or maybe you don't, Kate. Maybe you're booked out when you working in a shop.
Oh no, I get books every year and want books every year. I give people specific lists though, so I sort of tell people exactly which book I want.
I
don't have any surprises, but at least I get them.
I don't get gifted books by my family because they don't think it's nice to give books, because I always already buy books and have my nose in books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, just give me more
books. Come on.
Yeah,
absolutely. You never have enough books. That's what I
No.
keep telling my husband anyway.
No, exactly.
He would beg to differ.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you all season's greetings.
Yes,
And, thank you
Yes, very
so
lovely.
much for joining wherever you are, Belgium, all over UK as well. So thank you very much for joining and for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And do let us know, do let Jonathan know if you'd like to join us for a festive drink tomorrow night as well at 6 o'clock. And wishing you all a very happy Christmas if I don't speak to you before. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
your
so much.
time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Are we staying in? 3 of us? 4 of us?
And if you want to.
Thank you
No,
so
it's
much
okay.
for your time. It's
Yeah.
so great to hear you talk.
thank you.
very, very much.
Thank you. It was
Yeah.
lovely.
Let's do it again.
Yes,
Absolutely.
do it.
Yeah. Let's keep in touch, and thank you very much again.
So I just want to check, Charlotte, those emails about these types of events, are they sent out like the normal newsletter? Or
yeah,
isn't
they
there?
go to all members. Yeah, they
Okay,
go to all members.
I must check my
If-
spam.
Check your spam,
Yeah.
because some people have issues with their spam. Do check and
Yeah.
let Jonathan know if you've got an issue, because you should receive an event email and then a reminder before each event takes
Oh,
place.
yeah.
So it went out, I think, end of November, the
Mhm.
original email for
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Daisy
yeah.
Taylor.
I saw the tests, but I never got the final email, so I was like, "Oh, it's happening."
Yep.
So yeah, I'll check my
Your
spam folder. And
Might be
Yeah. I'm just looking now, and it went out on the 26th of November.
oh yeah, I'll check my spam folder
So
for that.
yeah, but
Yeah,
lots
so
of
I
people do end up.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Christmas event, so glad you mentioned
Yeah,
it.
6 o'clock tomorrow. Do pop in if you'd like to.
Yes.
If you,
Thank you very
Another
much.
jumper.
Jonathan, if you can make
Yeah, I've got another job.
he'll give